Her voice trembled, her back pressed against the cold wall of her apartment as his shadow towered over her. 5 years of silence were shattered in an instant. His eyes, sharp, furious, and wounded, fixed on her as if the ground beneath him had been ripped away. "You kept my daughter from me for 5 years?" His voice was low, almost breaking, yet each word struck like thunder. That single line changed everything. A secret buried to protect love, or perhaps to preserve fear, now threatens to unravel lives, reputations, and hearts. But what truly happened between them? Why did she make the impossible choice to walk away? And what will it cost him now that the truth is out? Stay with us, because this story will test the limits of love, betrayal, and redemption. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss our next powerful stories, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. The rain had eased, but the air still clung heavily, damp against the glass windows of St. Mary's Elementary. Amina pulled her coat tighter as she slipped into the small auditorium, the scent of crayons and old wood settling around her, like an unwelcome reminder of the fragile world she had built. Her daughter's laughter echoed from the front rows, bright, innocent, free of the shadows her mother carried. The children gathered for Reading Day, and parents lined the walls with careful smiles. Amina kept to the back, clutching her purse like a shield. She had done this for 5 years. Quiet entries, quiet exits, protecting a secret she prayed would remain untouched. But fate has its own script. William Kingsley stood near the podium, tall and commanding in his tailored suit, his presence too vast for the modest space. He was the guest sponsor, the man whose foundation had rebuilt the school library. His hair was trimmed sharply, his jaw set with the same discipline he used to face hostile boardrooms. He wasn't here for nostalgia or charity alone. This was image building. This was power draped in philanthropy. Yet his emerald eyes, restless as storms, searched the room as though something had unsettled him before the first word was spoken. Amina's chest tightened. She had not expected him here, not in this small corner of the city, not so close that the air seemed to contract between them. The teacher clapped her hands, calling each child to the stage. Tiny shoes tapped across the polished floor as names were spoken, and then came the voice that froze time. "Sophia Kingsley Rodriguez, I'm 5 years old. I love elephants and chocolate cake." The little girl bowed slightly, her auburn curls bouncing, her wide green eyes sparking with pride. Gas did not ripple through the room, but in the silence, Amina heard the world split open. She felt William's gaze strike like a blade. His chest rose, then stalled, as though breath itself had betrayed him. The syllables of his name rolling from the lips of a child he did not know burned more fiercely than any accusation. He did not move at once, though the tension in his stance betrayed a man tethered by sheer will. Amina pressed against the wall, her palms clammy, her mind pleading for invisibility. But William's eyes locked onto her across the crowded room, unblinking, filled with recognition and betrayal. He waited until the applause ended, until the teacher ushered the children off stage. Then he walked toward her, each step echoing like a verdict. She turned before he could reach her, guiding Sophia toward the exit, her hand trembling against the small shoulder she longed to protect. The corridor smelled of disinfectant and chalk dust, but even those ordinary scents became suffocating under the storm brewing behind her. "Stop!" His voice cut through the noise of children chattering, so low and forceful it bent the air. Amina froze. Sophia tugged at her sleeve, whispering about juice boxes and picture books. But her mother's body had turned rigid, pulled taut between fight and flight. William stepped closer, his polished shoes silent against the floor, his expression carved from fury and disbelief. 5 years! His whisper was harsher than a shout. Amina swallowed hard, her heart pounding against her ribs, every instinct urging her to run, yet knowing the truth had already broken through. She tried to steady her voice, but it cracked as she answered. "She's tired, please, not here." His jaw tightened, his emerald eyes flashing with something raw. "Not here? You think I care about the setting? My child stood on that stage and said my name, and you thought you could slip away?" Amina shifted, angling Sophia behind her, her body a shield. The little girl blinked between them, sensing tension but too young to grasp the weight of betrayal. Amina's mind spun, calculating escape, gauging the danger of confrontation. She remembered William's father, cold, manipulative, destructive, and the terror that history could repeat. "I did what I had to," she whispered, her tone defensive, fragile. "I couldn't risk it." William leaned closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous calm. "You decided who I was without giving me the chance to prove otherwise. You condemned me to absence. Do you know what you've taken from me?" His hand brushed through his hair, frustration spilling through the cracks of his composure. "First words, first steps. 5 years of a life I never knew existed." His words pierced her, and yet she stood firm, though her knees trembled beneath her coat. "I protected her. I protected myself. You have power, money, influence. You could have taken her from me, and I would have had nothing." Sophia tugged again, this time sensing danger in her mother's unsteady tone. Amina forced a smile down at her, masking the storm, then turned back to William with fire lacing her fear. "I will not let her become collateral in your empire. I won't let history repeat." His stare darkened, his voice nearly breaking. "And you believe I am the same as him? That my blood condemns me?" The hallway narrowed, their words bouncing against the walls, each syllable sharpening the divide. For a moment the world shrank to just the three of them, father, mother, daughter, trapped in a crucible of truth and accusation. Amina's breath shook, but she would not bend. She had spent 5 years building a fragile sanctuary, every choice made in the shadow of fear, every night whispering promises to her daughter that love meant protection. Now that the shield cracked beneath the weight of William's presence, but still she stood, trembling yet unyielding. She pulled Sophia closer, meeting his gaze with a steadiness that surprised even herself. "Whatever you believe I stole, I will not apologize for saving her from the ghosts that haunt your name." His eyes blazed, but beneath the fury was something else. Hurt, loss, a wound raw and unhealed. The moment stretched, heavy and unbearable, until the sound of children's laughter burst from the auditorium and spilled into the hall. Amina seized the distraction, tightening her grip on Sophia's hand, moving toward the door. William did not follow immediately, but his voice carried after her, low and searing. "This isn't over, Amina. Not by a long mile." She felt the words chase her down the corridor, burrow into her spine, promising storms yet to come. Her steps faltered, but she forced herself onward, each stride defiant, each breath laced with dread. The night pressed down on Amina's apartment like a weight she could not shrug off. Sophia slept in the small bedroom, her soft breaths a fragile rhythm that reminded Amina why she had endured 5 years of silence. She stood by the kitchen window, the glow of the city trembling across glass streaked with rain, and in that distorted reflection, she saw both the mother she had become and the woman she used to be. William's voice still rang in her ears, accusing, wounded, relentless. 5 years hidden had collapsed in a single moment at the school, and the fortress she had built from secrecy now threatened to crumble. She pressed her forehead to the cool pain, eyes closed, willing her heart to still, but the storm inside refused to settle. Memory broke through the fragile calm, carrying her back to nights when William's hand traced her spine as if she were the only truth in a world of lies. They had met in the glow of a laboratory, surrounded by glass vials and humming machines, where she spoke with passion about her work in community health, and he listened with disarming focus. He was more than the ruthless tycoon whispered about in boardrooms. He was a man who quoted Baldwin and carried old records of Coltrane in his penthouse. He had once told her she made him feel human. Yet even in those tender hours, shadows of his family lingered, like uninvited guests who whispered doubt into her heart. His mother's polite smile that never reached her eyes, his father's sharp comment that her presence could tarnish the Kingsley name. Each encounter laced with condescension masked as civility. Amina had heard the message loud and clear. She was an outsider who would never be welcome. It was not a single insult that broke her, but the steady erosion of belonging. One evening, after a charity dinner lit by chandeliers and lined with cold laughter, William had walked her to the car. She remembered the scent of his cologne, cedar and fire, mingling with the sour taste of humiliation that lingered after hours of being scrutinized. "They'll come around," he had whispered, but his tone lacked conviction, and she had known then that his love, though fierce, could not shield her from the fortress of his bloodline. That night she decided love was not enough, not against a family that saw her child as a blemish before she had even been born. Fear tightened around her like steel, and when she discovered the life growing inside her, she chose solitude over risk. She chose silence over surrender. Now, 5 years later, the silence was gone. William had seen Sophia. The innocence of a child's self-introduction had unleashed consequences Amina had dreaded since the day she walked away. She poured herself a glass of water, but the tremor in her hand betrayed her attempt at composure. Tomorrow would bring confrontation. William was not a man who allowed truth to remain unanswered, and she knew his reach extended far beyond tender memories. He commanded empires, and empires did not forgive deception. Across the city, William sat alone in his corner office on the 35th floor of Kingsley Industries, the skyline burning with midnight light behind him. He leaned back in his chair, tie loosened, eyes burning from replaying the moment Sophia had spoken his name. Rage boiled through him, but beneath it lay a hollow grief he could not extinguish. He had been robbed of 5 years, denied the chance to hear his daughter's laughter, to carry her when she stumbled, to be a presence instead of a stranger. He clenched his fists until the veins in his forearms rose, his reflection in the glass mocking him with the image of a man betrayed. Yet he was not merely a man scorned. He was a leader whose every weakness became an opportunity for others. His phone buzzed, the name on the screen dragging him back to the ruthless machinery of his empire. Charles Denmore, a shareholder with ambition that stank of desperation. William answered, his tone clipped. Denmore's voice oozed false sympathy. Heard you had quite the surprise today. Children have a way of complicating reputations. The press loves a scandal, William. Perhaps this is the wrong time to resist our merger proposal. Best to focus on family. Let those of us less distracted handle the empire. William's jaw locked, fury coiling beneath his ribs. Denmore had found out already. News traveled fast through the veins of power, and secrets were currency waiting to be exploited. He hung up without response, but the call left poison in its wake. Back in her apartment, Amina tucked the blanket around Sophia and kissed her forehead, whispering words meant as comfort, but laced with fear. She knew William would not relent. His determination was a force she had once admired, but now it threatened the fragile peace she had crafted. She feared not only his anger, but the vultures circling his empire, men like Denmore who would weaponize a child's existence for leverage. Her daughter's safety was no longer just about protecting her from William's father's legacy. It was about shielding her from the ruthless world of power struggles and boardroom wars she had tried so hard to escape. Amina sat at the edge of the bed, fingers clutching the fabric of the blanket, torn between dread and defiance. She remembered every night spent alone, every tear she swallowed, every hour she carried the weight of single parenthood. She had endured it all to give Sophia a life untouched by betrayal. And yet the past had caught her. William's voice in the hallway echoed like a prophecy. This isn't over. She knew tomorrow would bring a reckoning, one that would test not just her resolve, but her ability to protect the child she loved more than her own breath. The storm struck without warning. Amina had just finished folding laundry when Sophia's cough deepened into a sharp wheeze that clawed at the silence. She rushed into the bedroom, heart slamming as her daughter clutched her chest, eyes wide with panic. The sound of shallow, frantic breaths echoed against the walls, dragging Amina back to memories of her father collapsing under the same cruel grip of asthma. Fear shredded her composure, but instinct took hold. She pulled the inhaler from the drawer, pressing it into Sophia's trembling hands, whispering for her to breathe. Yet the attack did not ease, and dread coiled around her throat as Sophia's small body shook. Amina grabbed the phone, her voice breaking as she called for an ambulance, every second an eternity stretching tighter around her. Flashing lights bathed the street in red and blue as paramedics carried Sophia into the ambulance. Amina clung to her daughter's hand, whispering reassurances she barely believed. The sterile scent of antiseptic filled the air, mixing with the metallic tang of fear that coated her tongue. She wanted to be strong, but the memory of her father's last breath clawed at her, whispering that history might repeat. When they reached the hospital, bright lights stabbed her vision, and a rush of nurses surrounded Sophia. Amina followed but was forced to stop at the door as they moved her child into the emergency bay. The sound of beeping monitors and urgent commands carved into her, leaving her shaking at the threshold. Then a familiar figure appeared in the chaos. William pushed past a nurse, his face taut with alarm, his suit disheveled as though he had abandoned a meeting mid-sentence. His eyes locked onto Amina, fury and fear colliding in a storm that mirrored her own. She wanted to scream at him to leave, to stay away from the world she had fought to protect, but the desperation in his gaze stopped her. "Let me in," he demanded, his voice low, controlled only by will. Amina's body stiffened, her arms instinctively crossing as if to bar him from the room, but Sophia's strangled gasp reached them both. Amina's chest cracked open with helplessness. She pulled the spare inhaler from her bag, the one she always carried, and placed it in his hand. Her eyes burned as she whispered, "If you want to help, prove you can." William stepped into the room, the harsh white light washing across his face as he knelt beside the bed. His large hands trembled as he steadied the inhaler, guiding Sophia's tiny fingers around it, coaxing her to breathe slowly. The child's eyes, glazed with fear, searched his face, and something passed between them, an unspoken recognition that shattered the distance built by years of silence. The wheezing eased, each breath pulling deeper into her lungs until color returned to her cheeks. Relief hit Amina so hard she nearly collapsed against the wall, tears cutting through the mask of control she had worn for so long. She had trusted him in her most vulnerable moment, and he had not failed. As the machine steadied, William remained by the bed, his head bowed as if in prayer. He whispered to Sophia, voice raw, promising he would never leave again. Nurses drifted out, tension easing, but Amina could not relax. She watched him stroke their daughter's hair, saw the crack in his armor of power, and wondered if this was the man she had once believed in, or a performance crafted for her forgiveness. Yet her heart, despite its walls, felt the weight of truth in his trembling hands. He was not his father. He was not the man she had feared. He was something else, someone she had denied but could no longer ignore. The reprieve was brief. Morning light cut through hospital blinds as William's phone buzzed relentlessly. He ignored it until the name Charles Denmore flashed across the screen. Amina caught the flicker of hesitation before he answered, and she knew the Empire was already pressing against this fragile bubble of peace. Denmore's voice spilled venom through the receiver, warning that investors were restless, that rumors about William's hidden child had reached the press, that confidence in his leadership would collapse unless he surrendered control of the company. William's jaw tightened, his free hand curling into a fist on the windowsill. He turned away from Amina, but she heard every word, each threat striking at the foundation of his empire. When the call ended, silence hung heavy. He faced her, his eyes no longer filled with rage but with resolve. "They want me to give her up," he said quietly, glancing at Sophia's sleeping form. "They want me to step aside or risk losing everything." His voice cracked. A man used to commanding thousands was now brought to his knees by a choice that could not be avoided. Amina's breath caught. She had always feared his power, but now she saw its cost. He could walk away, preserve his empire, and reduce her daughter to a footnote hidden by money and silence. Or he could stand, lose wealth and allies, and embrace the family he had been denied for 5 years. She stepped closer, her hand brushing against Sophia's blanket as she spoke. "If you stay, it has to be real. Not guilt, not an obligation. Not because they cornered you. She needs a father who shows up because he chooses her, not because the world forced his hand." Her words carried no anger, only steel forged by years of surviving alone. William looked at her, the weight of her demand pressing heavier than any corporate ultimatum. He leaned down, kissed Sophia's forehead, and then whispered to Amina, his voice breaking with truth. "I choose her. I choose both of you, whatever it costs." Later that day, William stood before cameras, the world watching. His confession was deliberate, steady, stripping him of the secrecy that had armored his life. He named Sophia as his daughter, his pride, his future. The press erupted, investors panicked, and Denmore seethed in silence, but William did not flinch. He had made his choice, one that severed him from the Empire's chains and tethered him to something far more dangerous, yet infinitely more precious: love. The hospital had grown quiet after the storm of flashing cameras and William's confession, yet Amina felt no peace as she walked the sterile corridors with Sophia's small hand folded in hers. Reporters crowded the entrance, their questions slicing through the night air, but William had shielded them with his broad frame, absorbing the chaos like a wall of stone. Now, in the muted hum of machines and disinfectant, Amina realized the world outside had changed forever. Their names were no longer whispered in private but screamed on every headline. And yet the only sound she heard was her daughter's gentle breathing, proof that she had survived, proof that William's choice had not come too late. When Sophia was finally discharged, dawn spilled over the horizon, painting the city in hues of amber and silver. William offered to drive them home, his car waiting by the curb, sleek and unyielding, but Amina refused the tinted cocoon of wealth. She hailed a taxi instead, her decision deliberate, a reminder that her life had never needed extravagance to have meaning. William climbed in beside them, ignoring the puzzled driver's glance, and for the first time in years, they shared silence not as enemies but as parents bound by the fragile trust of a single night. The city outside blurred past, neon signs fading into brick apartments, and Amina wondered if trust, once shattered, could ever truly be rebuilt. The apartment welcomed them with its familiar imperfections: chipped paint along the doorframe, the faint hum of the old refrigerator, the blanket folded neatly on the couch. To Amina, these walls were sacred, a fortress carved by sacrifice and loneliness. To William, they seemed too small, too fragile. Yet he said nothing as he stooped to place Sophia's stuffed elephant on the sofa. The child clutched it instantly, curling against the cushions as if the world beyond did not exist. Amina caught William's gaze and saw for the first time not pity or disdain, but reverence. He was seeing her life, unpolished and bare, and realizing it had been enough to raise a daughter who could smile despite the shadows. William moved to the window, staring at the city spread below. His phone buzzed again, Denmore's name flashing like a curse, but he silenced it without hesitation. Turning back, he spoke with a gravity that pulled the room taut. "I've already sent my resignation. They can fight over the empire. I won't let them use her as leverage." Amina's heart faltered at his words. She had braced for compromise, for promises wrapped in half measures, but instead he had cut the cord binding him to power. His jaw was tight, his voice steady, yet she sensed the cost beneath the control. For a man who had lived by conquest, surrendering his throne was no small wound. She stepped closer, the dim light etching his face with shadows. "You gave up everything." Her words carried both awe and fear. William shook his head. "No, I finally chose something real." He looked at Sophia, her curls spilling across the pillow, her chest rising steadily. "For 5 years, I chased numbers and titles. Tonight I understood they mean nothing without presence. She doesn't need a CEO. She needs a father who's here." The confession pierced Amina, undoing years of hardened defenses. For so long she had feared his world would swallow her child. Yet here he was, renouncing it, standing in her small kitchen like a man stripped of armor, raw and unmasked. The hours slipped into evening, and the apartment filled with the scent of simmering stew as Amina cooked while William sat at the table, peeling carrots clumsily under Sophia's amused instructions. The scene was ordinary, absurdly so, yet Amina felt the tremor of something extraordinary threading through it. They were not defined by chandeliers or corporate towers, but by laughter echoing off cracked walls, by hands working together over a simple meal. When William placed the carrots unevenly on the plate, Sophia giggled, declaring him "Daddy," with a certainty that left no room for denial. He froze, the title settling over him like a crown heavier than any he had worn before. And then he smiled, eyes damp, as though the word itself had redeemed him. Later that night, when Sophia was asleep, Amina and William sat across from each other at the small table. The lamp cast a soft circle of light between them, illuminating the silence that begged to be broken. William leaned forward, his hands folded, his voice hushed. "I can't erase the years I lost. I can't undo the pain I caused by being absent. But I can promise this: I will show up. Every day. Not because I'm expected, but because I want to. Because she deserves it. Because you deserve it too. His sincerity was a blade cutting through every doubt, leaving only the raw question of whether she could believe again. Amina met his gaze, her own voice trembling but unyielding. I don't need promises written in stone. I need presence. I need to know you'll stand when storms come, that you won't let the weight of your name or your fear push you away again. Her words were not a plea, but a condition, forged by scars that refused to fade. William reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers, and for the first time, she did not pull away. The silence between them shifted, no longer a chasm but a bridge. Outside, the city roared with headlines, investors scrambling, empires shifting, but within those modest walls, another empire was forming, one built not on wealth or control, but on faith and resilience. Amina understood that tomorrow would bring battles, public scrutiny, whispers of betrayal, the endless pull of William's abandoned world. Yet as she watched him lean over Sophia's bed to kiss her goodnight, she realized the true measure of power was not in titles, but in the quiet choice to be present when it mattered most. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this powerful story. What did you feel while listening? Did any part of Amina and William's journey resonate with you? We'd love to hear your thoughts, so share them in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss our next story, and let us know where in the world you're watching from. It's always inspiring to see our community connect across so many places. Until next time, take care of yourself, cherish the people who matter, and we'll see you in the next video.